the mighty Art D from Morehead City.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Art Denning. Before I get started, let me tell you about a couple of rednecks. Let me settle down. You're already settled down. This one redneck asked the other redneck, said, "Where did you get the nice bicycle?" And he said, "Well, this real pretty girl was riding into town, and I met her, and she stopped and pulled off all her clothes and told me I could have anything I wanted." And he said, "Well, you made a real good choice. Her clothes probably wouldn't have fit you anyway." Rednecks get a real hard time. I lived down on the coast. We had a lot of insects this summer. Bad. The flies were bad down there. They had this one fly. I was waving around my head and trying to make him leave, and I asked this one fellow, I said, "What kind of flies is that?" He said, "They're bad flies. They're Zuzu flies." I said, "What's a Zuzu fly?" He said, "Well, it's a real bad fly. They usually fly around horses' butts." I said, "Is that what you calling me?" He said, "No, but you can't fool with them Zuzu flies." Well, I better get settled down here and let's talk about some real serious stuff like that fun life of drinking booze and writing bad checks and getting locked up and chasing women. Well, I didn't chase too many women. I was too drunk. But that's what we're supposed to do is, according to the literature, is in a general way. That's the guideline we try to go by. And when I go with the guidelines in our literature, I don't get in trouble, but I stray off of them. I'm a country boy, you can tell that. I always wanted to be a big shot. I didn't set out to be an alcoholic. I wanted to be a big shot. I wanted to be somebody. I was raised on a farm a few counties from here, over in Harnett County. And during the Depression, and I didn't know we were poor people. My dad was able to hold on to his farm during the Depression. A lot of people didn't. And I thought everybody was about the same, so I didn't know we were poor people. But later in life I did. And I wanted to be a big shot. And the reason I'm telling you about I wanted to be a big shot, I know years ago when I was first trying to get sober, the old-timers call it big shot-itis, and they call it pride and other things. Now, I don't. They used to say, "He's got big shot-itis, he's fixing to get drunk, you better talk to him," and that's what they used to say, and that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be a man of wealth, and I was going to get an education, but I got into John Barleycorn early. I was 15 years old. I got through high school, but I sure couldn't get through college. You cannot pass freshman English at NC State and drink booze and do the things that goes with drinking booze like I did. I never did get a college degree. I could pass the math, but I couldn't get past the English or the physics. But that isn't all that important. I'm not going to string you out with a long runk-a-log, but I do want to tell you about how I come into this disease and how it materialized. I was in the Korean War, and I drank every time they'd let me, or every time I could get to a drink, and I used it very effectively for as long as I could. It nearly killed me. After the Korean War, I started studying. I knew I couldn't stay in school, couldn't stay sober long enough to pass any grades, but I knew I could maybe pass some courses. So I took enough courses to stand for an examination. This state has a real good board of registration for engineers and land surveyors. And I wanted to be a civil engineer so bad, and I couldn't be one, but they didn't know about my drinking, didn't know about my history. I hadn't been locked up yet. The board don't let people practicing alcoholics take the exam. They won't let them take it if they know it. They didn't know about me. And they let me take the exam, and I passed it. And they gave me a license. And they turned me loose on the public of North Carolina. They didn't know what they were doing. And I moved down to a little town of Dunn. It's not too far from here. And I went into business, and I wanted to be a big shot. I went into an engineering and land surveying and land planning business. And for a year, I worked hard. I've never done controlled drinking. I don't know what that is. I don't understand it. It still bothers me to go to a restaurant and see somebody with a glass of wine, and they fiddle around with it and play with it, and they leave half of it there when they leave. It just irks me. And in the grocery store, I do not understand someone buying 2 beers. If they would buy 2 12-packs, I could understand that a little better. But they buy I don't know why. I don't understand them doing it. I didn't drink that. I never did do any controlled drinking. I don't know what that is. But I did work for a year in this business that I went into. I worked hard. I worked day and night. I had one crew of surveyors, and then I would do my mapping and planning at night. And we did subdivisions and shopping centers all over eastern North Carolina, some in Fayetteville. We even did a golf course over in Pinehurst in my drinking days. I think there's 18 holes on it. Anyway, a year went by, and at the end of the year, I had a CPA set me down and said, all right, we need to go over your books. We need to look at your financial situation. And he said, you owe the government this many taxes, and then you owe some withholding taxes for your employees and some other government taxes. Then you owe the state so many taxes, and told me a whole string of taxes owed the state. And then you owe some bills. After you pay all these things, you got this much money left. And when that man said that figure, something clicked. Something went off. I had arrived. I was a big shot. I was the best thing that had ever happened in this world. I really thought that I was the best. And I had made it. I'm now a big shot. And I got to thinking, and that's dangerous. I got to thinking, if I made that much money with 3 men, why not get 3 more crews and, quadruple up and make 3 or 4 times as much money? And I need a new office. I need a red carpet in my office too. And I need a big drafting room with a lot of office people doing drafting and planning. And I need some automobiles, new automobiles. And one thing I had always wanted me a blonde secretary. And I need to do some, public relations work and get out in the public, meet the people. I haven't been doing any socializing, and the people don't really know me. I need to do a little drinking with some folks. So I got all these things together, and I started drinking. And at first I drank with some right important people. I drank with some mayors and some state legislators. And a little later on, I Started drinking with some people with a little less stature maybe, and then a little later on was still more or less stature, and then a little later on I started drinking with me, just me, around the clock. And another year went by. And another year went by. And I had lost track of time. Time didn't mean anything. I either came to one morning or night or sometime during the frame period, and I didn't have a home, and I didn't have a business. That little blonde secretary alone been gone. It's all gone. And something happened to me that brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I've heard a lot of reasons. I've been coming to AA right a good while. And I've heard a lot of reasons people come here. And to me, it doesn't make any difference. I love to see people come in AA. It just turns me on. I know what they're in for, and if they'll just come in and do what's suggested, I know what's going to happen in their life. Because I've seen it's happened to me, and I've seen it happen to too many people. I don't care why they come here. I don't care who they are and what they think they are. But they've come for all kinds of reasons. People are afraid to lose something, maybe lose their spouse, or, maybe lose anything. Maybe the military sends them, or the court sends them, or they get sent through any kind of legal system. Or maybe they just walk in, want to do something about their drinking, and they're sick and tired of being tired and sick. It doesn't matter. But I have yet to find out anybody that come for the reason I did. Maybe I will tonight. Maybe I won't tonight, because I really don't want to see anybody come for the reason I did. An Internal Revenue agent sent me in. That's when I come. I didn't pay them taxes that CPA pointed out to pay to his federal government. And this fella had come in my life. And he was the meanest man I have ever run across. He was the exact opposite of you folks. He didn't have any love, any compassion, any understanding whatsoever about this man. He kept wanting or talking about sending me down to this place in Atlanta to make pocketbooks. I decided I better get sober and go to work and get this man off my back. He's going to put me in that federal penitentiary. And so I had always said, if drinking got to be a real problem, I'd quit. So I did. For a day and a half. A whole day and a half. That's when I knew something was wrong with Art. Bad wrong with Art. I wanted to drink so bad. I'm going to try to describe to you, and I know some of you know, probably a lot of you in this room know what I'm talking about. If someone's life had depended on me not drinking, even my children, and I love my two children, anybody's life, they would have died. I had to have a drink. And that's as bad as I can describe it, because I love life and I love people, especially since coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I love people all my life. And I valued life. But I wanted to drink that bad. I called a brother of mine, he said that, I told him I was in trouble, I couldn't quit drinking. He said he worked a lot of people, and he said he'd noticed some of them had drinking problems through the years, and they had gone to a place called Alcoholics Anonymous, and he said, I don't know what they do. But whatever it is, they are happy people now. They're the most honest people I've ever met, and they're the hardest working people we've ever had. And he said, I think you ought to look them up and see what they got. And I said, surely I'm not that bad. But about a week later, at that Internal Revenue agent, I decided I was. And I called Alcoholics Anonymous. And some folks come and got me, and they took me to my first AA meeting. It was in February of 1964. And usually, when we go on 12-step calls, we send 2 people. We travel in pairs. And they sent 4 people after me. And I had made the call around noon in the telephone. Thank God we got telephones in my lifetime, and thank God we still got Alcoholics Anonymous in the telephone book. Sometimes that's the only resort. Should have been the first resort, not the last resort for some of us. But there it was. I called them at 12 o'clock, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I said, I have overreacted. And I started thinking of this speech I was going to give these guys, when they come. They said they'd have someone pick me up. I didn't know what to expect. I figured there'd be a couple of rough-looking, bum-looking, unshaven people come by, maybe. And I didn't want to be seen with them, but surely maybe if I could come up with the right thing to say, because I'm a good con artist. I still am. My first sponsor told me that, you're gifted with a good conning ability. Don't you ever use it for selfish purposes. Use it to help people. Then it's all right. It's an asset. Anyway, I've come up with this real good thing. I had it all planned out what I would tell them. I'd made a mistake. Well, up comes this big Roadmaster Buick, and 4 guys get out of it, and they're all dressed in black suits. Big people running, I thought they were the mob. In fact, they were dressed kind of like I had on these black suits. And I surely they remember the mafia or something. What in the world am I going to do? I'd almost forgot my speech. And I opened my mouth and got about 2 words out. And I know some of you have heard Jack from Kentucky say, shut up and get in the car. They either said, shut up and get in the car, or get in the car. And they did it with a tone that was demanding. I was scared not to get in the car. I figured they'd shoot me if I didn't. I got in the back seat with these 2 big mobsters, one sitting on, and off we go to the AA meeting. And then they had it in the little town of Dunn. They had an armory. And in the middle of the armory was a big open area, and at each end of the armory they had these steps that would go up to a room in the attic. And that's where they had the AA meeting, in one of those attics, and these steps were exposed to that big open area. Well, the JCs were having a basketball tournament coming up, and they had put some temporary basketball goals out in the armory, and they were practicing for the tournament. And I said, oh my God, they're going to see me going to an AA meeting and find out I'm a drunk. And I was a member of the JCs. I wasn't so active right now, but I was a member of the JCs. That was one of the most foolish thoughts I have ever had in my life. In 1964, to be a member of the Dunn JCs, Dunn, North Carolina, you had to be a drunk. You had to be a jar-drinking drunk. They should all been going to the meeting, but I didn't know that. And here I am with these 4 big guys, and we're going up these long set of steps, and they are old steps. And they squeaking, and these big old heavy guys, they had me right in the middle of them. I couldn't go nowhere. Two behind me, two in front of me. And we're going up, and I'm afraid that things are going to fall in. And they kept squeaking. I said, surely they're going to see me. We finally get to the top and get inside, and here was this man, and I knew him, and he knew me, and he said, hi, Art. It looked like he'd been expecting me. And I'd wondered what his name was. Cooper. Cooper's been dead many, many years. He was a postmaster. A lot of postmasters been in AA, I've noticed. But I used to drink liquor. I'd wondered what had happened to Cooper. I didn't see him out at the bootleggers, you know. I've never lost credit with my bootlegger. I lost credit with everybody else, but I never lost credit with my bootlegger. And Cooper and I used to, you know, get over some hangovers drinking moonshine out at the bootleggers, and we'd tell sob stories to one another. But I hadn't seen Cooper, and here he was, and he was clean, and he was clean shaven, and he was dressed good, and there he was, sober. I mean, you could tell he was sober, and he was happy, he was smiling, and he said, Art, get yourself a cup of coffee. Well, that's the next thing I don't understand. Maybe I will before the night's over, and they tell me if I keep coming, I'll understand it. I don't know why we have to give people coffee. I just don't understand that. I didn't like coffee. I thought he was ordering me to get one, and I had to do it to get in. Now, folks, I don't know a lot about chemistry. I think I know H2O is water and K9P comes from a dog. That's about all I know about. But coffee makes you nervous. You're already nervous. It burns you. You shake it, and you spill it, and it burns you, and you embarrass yourself. And we tell these new people, get a cup of coffee. I don't understand. AA would have to shut down if we didn't have coffee. I was talking to David earlier today, and he said, I said, you know, I think coffee is the biggest profit that some of these hotels make off of us. He agreed with me. We would have to shut down if we didn't have the coffee. I don't understand it. I still don't like coffee. I drink 1 cup in the morning, that's it. I can't handle no more coffee. Well, I spilled it, burnt myself. They grabbed some towels and cleaned up after me and got me seated. And Jake was chairing the meeting. That's his heart. Jake was the oldest living member in the state with his sobriety, and he died a few years ago. And when he died, he had the longest length of sobriety, I think, at the time. It was 50-some years. But I love Jake. I won't never forget Jake. But he was chairing the meeting. And the topic was working on the steps. And I said, you really need to work on them steps, I tell you. I jumped up and told him, too. I said, I think there are more than 12 of them. And I offered to help him. You know, I had some tools left I hadn't hawked, and then I heard another familiar cliche of love. You know, there's a lot of love in AA. The cliches in AA. Shut up, sit down and listen. That's what they told me. That's love. You know, we laugh about it and cut up about it, but think about some of these things. Go around the corner and count yourself. That's love. Where else can you hear somebody call your bluff? Believe it or not, I used to have people pat me on the back and say, Art, you're too nice a boy to drink the way you do. You know, they quit saying that, but they used to say that. And they would pat me on the back and say, you're going to be all right. And these were good, well-meaning people. But I wasn't going to be all right. I got in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had people pat me on the back and say, look, if you keep living the way you're living, And, alcohol's going to kill you. And if you kill, they'd give me another one in loving, tender terms of endearment, I call it. If you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. That's terms of endearment. Say they love. I like it. I hope we keep it up. I still need it. Those good people took me around the state. We didn't have meetings like we do now. And I didn't stay sober, but I never quit coming. Thank God they say keep coming back. Because if they didn't say keep coming back, I wouldn't have made it. I couldn't have lived. And we would go to all these meetings and I'd hear all these horrible stories, and people had seen things that weren't there, and they'd heard things that weren't there, and they'd been in hospitals for drinking, and been in jails and insane asylums, and all kinds of bad things, and none of those things had happened to me. I had never been to no hospital for drinking. I'd been in the hospital for acute gastritis and nervousness. They put those kind of terms on there so they get their money. That's what they did. They should have been acute alcoholism on the chart. That wasn't what was on there. They couldn't get paid for it back then. But I didn't think I was drunk. I wasn't bad as those people. Besides, I was too young. Too young. That's just too young to be a drunk. Anyway, I decided one night or one day or whenever that I wasn't as bad as those people were, and I better get out of that outfit. And I started about the drinking, and here's what happened. The first thing that happened to me is they locked me up. They put me in jail for public drunkenness. It was a crime then. It's no longer a crime in the state of North Carolina. Now, you might do some other things with that and it'd be a crime, but just being drunk in North Carolina is not a crime. There's a good reason for that. And some well-meaning AA members working on their own time and not associating AA at all was tired of so many drunks dying in jails and DTs, and they got that law, and the AA members got that law passed on their own, not representing Alcoholics Anonymous, but working on their own time and not affiliate. And I know that because I was one up. My sponsor had me knocking on doors, but it was a crime then. Now I know there's some people here tonight that knows exactly what I'm talking about. With the most horrifying, degrading sound is a jail door slamming on you. I mean, there's no other sound like it when that thing shuts, and it's all in its own. It's horrible. The first time, after a while, it's going so bad, you get used to it. They kept locking me up. And I started seeing things that weren't there and hearing things that weren't there. And they would take me to the hospital and put me in restraints and give me shots. I was having DTs. I used to see these little men walking around on my windowsill. Pretty little fellas. Had on tuxedos. Carnations up here. And they'd walk around, and I'd say, well, you're not going to bother me. I heard about you down at those AA meetings. And I'd take a drink. Most of the time, they'd go away. One day, I figured out they were undertakers, and then I went bananas, and they hauled me off to the hospital. 6 months of this went on, and I ended up in a state mental institution up in Butner in a straitjacket in the nut ward. And I was not only in a straitjacket, they had me tied to a bunk with restraints. And I was screaming, literally screaming. And I don't know how long I stayed in that institution. It wasn't an institution, it was an insane asylum. It was a nut house. It wasn't a treatment center. I was nuts. I mean, I was alcoholic and I was in DTs, but I was still nuts. I was crazy. I was a sick man. I shouldn't have lived. I don't know how long I stayed there. I don't want to go back. They tell me I won't have to go back if I keep doing what I'm asked to do in AA. And I don't want to go back to a place like that. I'd like to tell you why I think I got there. Some of my story is hearsay, but they tell me this is what happened. The Internal Revenue agent had, of course, got back on the picture. And he had said if he called me, it was like a sheriff's warrant, that I had to do what he said do, or I would be locked up. And I believed him. And one day or night or whenever, I'm all hung over, and the telephone starts ringing. And I said, don't nobody answer that telephone. It's him. I know it's him. And it kept ringing. It wouldn't stop ringing. I don't answer that telephone. And the receiver come up off of it and started coming toward me, and I started screaming. And they hauled me off to the funny farm. You see, I didn't have a telephone. Folks, I didn't have lights. I was in AA a long time before I would admit that I would steal water from my neighbor. I'd go next door and steal water from his water faucet. It was a long time before I would admit that. It was a long time before I would admit I was throwing up drunk. And it was a long time before I would admit that I went all the way in Raleigh, North Carolina to a special plumbing supply store and bought a special commode seat that had a slot in it that wouldn't fall and hit me on the back of the head when I was throwing up. Now, a long time before I admit those things. I was a bad drunk. Things kept getting worse, and I kept coming back, and I was fighting the very thing that would get me well. They would talk about spiritual matters and spiritual things, and I didn't want no part of it, and I didn't want to hear it, and I just turned it off. I just couldn't stand the thoughts of it. I don't know why I did it, but I fought it. The day come when I had to quit fighting it or die. And I got a sponsor and a home group and a big book, and I got a good sponsor. And I had my last drink on January 22nd, 1972. And it's been a ride ever since. And I haven't fought anything spiritual since. I don't have any beef with it. I'm not a very religious person, but I sure hope I'm a spiritual-minded person. I sure, at this time in my story, I get a little choked up, and because I have to tell you, start telling you about how it is now and what some of the good things that's happened. You see, I was married to an alcoholic, and we it ended up in divorce, and we had 2 children. My daughter was grown, but I still had a young son that was with me, and I was sober. And I had my first sponsor, and he's been dead about many years. I'm working on my 5th sponsor, by the way. They've all died. My 5th one is very, very nervous. I know Wallace back there knew my first sponsor, Al. I don't want a day go by I don't think of something that he said that, makes me think. And, makes me come to, and a lot of people didn't know the side of Al that I did. I knew this man, he could literally read my mind, and I'm glad he could. We got to be real close. I miss him dearly. I miss all my sponsors. I moved to Morehead City down on the coast after I'd been sober. I went down to Charleston, South Carolina, and developed an island sober, going to AA sober. That was a new deal. Do that kind of work sober. Good AA down there. Anyway, I moved back to Raleigh, and then after moving to Raleigh, this ex-wife was causing so much flack, and I knew I had to get my young son out of this mess, and we moved to Morehead City down on the coast, and I always wanted to live there. And another miracle happened. Another gift was given to me. I used to, and I still do, with people I sponsor. I'm involved. I believe in sponsorship. But I used to. You couldn't even talk with the members of the opposite sex unless they'd been sober a year, and you've been sober a year. That would seem to be the requirement. There's something about that year, they said, was important. Well, I'd been sober about 5 years, and Jody had been sober a little over a year, and they let me talk to Jody, and she's with me tonight. And 2 years later, we were married. AA gave me a family. We've been married 19 years now. And my son, he couldn't, because of everything going on, he couldn't learn his multiplication tables, and he couldn't. It looked like he wasn't going to be able to get into high school, and she taught him how to. I couldn't teach him, but she taught him his multiplication tables, and he made the honor roll. But I knew he was going to be an alcoholic because he was too much like me. And when he was in high school, he started drinking beer, and he was good at karate, and I knew it was just frightening to me because I had some martial art training myself, and I knew how dangerous it was if you were drinking. It's dangerous anyway, but if you're drunk and using it, it is horrible. And it was frightening for me for my son to be drunk. And he'd get in trouble, and I'd pay his way out. I'd do everything the all-known say don't do, I would do it. I knew I would eventually have to quit, but I just couldn't stand to see him spend the night in jail. And I'd pay his way out. But one day, he made a phone call, and so he called me, and he said, "Dad, call somebody in AA. I got to have some help. I can't handle it no more." And another miracle happened. Some people like you took him to a meeting, and he got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. He'll be sober 10 years come January. And something ironic about that young man, I fought spirituality so bad. I fought religion, organized religion so bad. You know, thank God we got churches. We have so many churches that let us meet in their buildings, and they were so good to us. And here I was, I just didn't like them. I don't know why I didn't like them. Sick. Here's the ironic part. My son is be getting his bachelor's degree in theology. I don't know why he's doing this to me. And he wants to go in and get his master's. He wants to be a minister. Now, things happen in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my service career in service. They let me make coffee and clean up the meeting hall, and they made me chairman for the first 3 months of my home group. When I got sober, my sponsor made me chairman. I would set up all the chairs. I was the chairman. And for 3 months I did that. That's how my service career started. Later on, I was drafted as a GSR group, and I was drafted 2 more times in 2 more different groups, and elected to the DCM, and I was elected state PI chairman, the alternate delegate, and then he elected me a delegate. And I'm almost through my first year as your delegate. But this is all a gift, and I didn't particularly want it. I tell you, I wanted to go home when I finished my PI work, and I wanted to, but some people I knew at GSO said, Art, you can't get out of service work, general service work. And I had some old timers tell me, said, oh, why don't you put it in God's hands and just, they won't elect you anyway, just leave your name up there and then put it in God's hands and leave it there and then go on about your business. And if you don't, you'll be putting it in your will, inserting your will, and you'll have a guilty conscience. And they won't elect you, and then you're going home. I said, that's good. Well, you see what happened. And that's all I want to say. It was a gift, and it's been one amazing experience. I would like to share one thing with you about New York. When I went to New York to GSO last April, how good it made me feel. A lot of things, we'd be here 2 weeks before I could explain what went on up there, but I never could explain it. You can't. You can't describe it. I just wish all of you could have been there with me. You were there with me, really. I felt it. Because I'd asked you to pray for me and be with me, and you did. I could feel it. Let me tell you something about correctionals. The corrections in committee in North Carolina. All the good things I heard. People come to me and ask me about you. They know about you. They're making a video and they're using formats that they've learned from people right here. Some of them in this room tonight. And it made me feel so good. Of course, all of them make you feel good anyway, but they especially made me feel good about the corrections committee in this state. That was beautiful. I'm going to tell you a quick story and then I'm going to sit down. And I'm going to enjoy this. I'm not my favorite speaker. You got a beautiful weekend coming. And I'm looking forward to it. And before I do sit down, I want all of you to know I love you and I'm glad to be here. But I want to tell you a story and sit down that is I hope it offends no one here, because it's my story. And it happened to me. And if it hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be alive. I wouldn't be here. I know I would. About 200 years ago, a man called John Newton lived. And this man was a mean, despicable man. He seemingly had no morals, no scruples. Terrible person. He was a slave trader on the high seas. And one night on the seas, they had a storm. And it looked like the ship would go down. They would all drown. And John Newton, as mean a person as he was, come to an understanding with a God of his understanding and surrendered, kind of like we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he made a decision. And he asked God if he could see fit to let him live through the storm, he would spend the rest of his life trying to do what he wanted him to do. Kind of like we do in the third step. And God did see fit to let him live through the storm. And John Newton tried the rest of his life to live God's will. He never claimed to make up for all the wrongdoings because he couldn't. It was too insurmountable, like some of us feel. But we got a loving God in here that works. I used to want my conscience removed surgically. It bothered me so bad. Thank God we got a loving God that takes care of that for us. One of the things that John Newton is most famous for is he wrote a song. And that's part of my story. I told you I was in Charleston and developing an island, and while I was there, it was good AA there. I had a man said, why don't you go to a spiritual retreat with me this coming weekend? And I think you would learn you want to learn the spiritual program, and we'll be doing a lot of stuff. And I said, okay. Well, the weekend come and I couldn't go. But the next week I saw this man. I said, hey, how did your spiritual retreat go? How did it work out? Did you like it? He said, oh, it was marvelous. It was wonderful. Very spiritual. We learned a lot. and we sang the AA hymn. I said, hold it, we don't sing hymns in AA. He said we had a spiritual retreat for AA members and their families and friends. It was not an AA meeting. And we sang this hymn, and we're going to sing it again next year. I said, well, what was the name of it? And he told me. I said, well, all right. And I got in my automobile and went home and started driving home. And I started thinking about the words in this hymn he had mentioned. And Bill Wilson had a thing happen to him. I read where he said it usually happens to all of us one way or another. Sometimes it happens suddenly, sometimes it takes years, but it happens. And something happened as I was thinking about the words in that old hymn. And I didn't see no flashing light. And, I never had any of those kind of things sober. Had plenty of them drunk, but I never had them sober. But I knew something was going on, and something started happening to me. An awakening, awareness, or whatever. I somehow knew my life would never be the same, and I was going to be all right. And this old hymn was by John Newton. And the words went something like this. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, and I was blind, but now I see. You see, folks, I have become a wretch of a person. No human power could have helped me. But this amazing grace of God, and we talk about it in AA, and I don't mind talking about it. We talk about the grace of God many times. We even got it tacked on walls. And we see another drunk, and we say, but for the grace of God. This amazing grace of God. I'm no longer lost. I'm starting to see now. I'm not blind. This old hymn by John Newton, so meaningful, describes my alcoholism very well. But more importantly, it gives me the grace and the strength to live one day without one drink. God bless you. Thank you.